to present to a computer behind the scenes here. So it's always nice to get a little feedback. But like I said before, my name is Jenny Levine Fink, and I am a certified integrative nutrition coach, and I am also the blogger behind Good For You Gluten Free. And some of you might know me from Good For You Gluten Free. It's a blog. I'm also on Instagram, and you might be a part of my newsletter as well. And I'm really excited to be here at the Nourished Festival. And I wanted to thank Jen Cafferty and the entire Nourished Festival team for giving me this opportunity to share what I know with all of you about a very important topic. And that is about decoding confusing labels, ingredients, and products for gluten. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go there. This is like serious stuff. And there's a lot of confusing and controversial products and ingredients out there. And we're going to talk about all of them, or as many as I can today. There's obviously more than I can fit in this presentation. So we are gonna go and talk about some of these products that are a little bit controversial. And this is live. I am in a bedroom. I had to lock myself in a bedroom because I've got a house full of kids who are doing remote learning. My husband's downstairs, so I had to lock myself in the upstairs bedroom. So anyway, I am really excited to present with you. Here's the deal. I'm not going to be able to see you when I share my screen, which I'm going to do right now. And so it's really, really important that if you have questions, you just type them in that question box. And then I can come back at the end of the call, at the end of the session, and answer your questions live, okay? So go ahead and send your questions there. And when I come back on after I share my screen, I'll be back on camera and I'll be able to see your questions, but I won't be able to see them while I'm doing my presentation. So let me see here if I am able to share my screen. So we are gonna go into present mode here with my presentation. And I also forgot to mention two things in my introduction is that I have a book that came out, a brand new book. It's called Dear Gluten. It's not me, it's you. I don't even have a copy of it yet. That's how new it is. But you can pre-order it on Amazon.com. And I also have a free gift for you. So stay to the end of this chat, to this presentation, and I'll share with you how you can get this free gift, okay? All right. So today we're going to talk about current labeling laws, how to decode confusing claims and disclosures, and how to identify gluten in tricky ingredients and products. And we're going to talk about some hefty stuff. I want to make sure you know that I'm going to give you information as best I can. You have to do the due diligence. You have to make the call for yourself in a lot of these cases, and I'll remind you of that throughout this presentation, because these are somewhat individual decisions based on all the information that you're able to gather from a product label. So the most important thing to remember about food labels is that you should avoid foods that have labels. And that was a quote from Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He's a great doctor and author, and I've followed his work for a long time. And so obviously foods like avocados and apples and eggs are not going to have gluten in them. They're just going to have one ingredient, and that is an apple. And therefore, you know, there is no gluten in an apple. But that's not always realistic because we live in the real world here, and we like to have bread and we like to have crackers, and we even like to make our own bread. And we need to know if the baking powder and if the flour and all the other ingredients are safe for us to be using. And so this is where we have to get into this kind of icky topic of label reading. And so before we talk about some of the confusion in the industry, it's important for us to define what the current FDA gluten-free labeling guidelines are. And even these are a tad bit confusing as well. And so any food that is labeled gluten-free, no gluten, free of gluten, or without gluten must contain less than 20 parts per million of gluten. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second in my next slide. So you're going to see what 20 parts per million looks like. And it must not contain any wheat, rye, barley, or crossbreds of these grains unless the grain has been processed to remove the gluten so it contains no more than 20 parts per million. So that means potentially some products with wheat in it can be labeled gluten-free. And we're going to get into some of those products soon and why it's so confusing for us to understand what is and is not safe for us. All right. Also important to note about the gluten-free labeling guidelines is that while it covers all food and beverages, it does not cover meat and poultry. That is regulated by the USDA, and it does not regulate or go to alcohol beverages. It does not regulate alcohol. That is a whole other bureau as well. So we're just talking about food and beverages. All right, so I told you I'd tell you what 20 parts per million looks like because I think it's so hard to even grasp what that looks like. And so I found this image on the internet, and this is 1 million pixels. The gray box is 1 million pixels. And the little black speck, you see it right there? That little black speck is 20 pixels. So that if anyone ever says to you a crumb doesn't hurt you, you'd be like, yes, it does. Look, that is a crumb. That is 20 parts per million. So 20 parts per million is a very minute amount of gluten, and that's the legal limit. Anything over 20 parts per million cannot be labeled gluten-free, although, like I said before, those are voluntary guidelines. So these are guidelines that the FDA set forth, and companies can decide whether they want to follow those guidelines and use the labeling rules as well. Okay, so obvious. This is like so obvious. Look for the words gluten-free on a package. And so I have a picture there of Bob's Red Mill. You can see gluten-free is all over this thing, gluten-free, gluten-free. And they also have this thing that says gluten-free. And remember, that is not a certification. That is just a graphic design that says gluten-free in a circle right there. But when you see a product that has gluten-free written so confidently on it, this is probably a company that cares about gluten-free and is labeling in a way that they're testing their products and there's truth in their labeling. Obviously, another obvious is to look for the certified gluten-free label. And right here on my picture of the Canyon Bakehouse bread, you can see right there the arrows pointing the little certified gluten-free circle, GF circle. However, just so you know, that certified gluten-free logo is changing. That is what the GFCO, the gluten-free certifying organization, is using. That logo is changing. So you're going to soon see this purple and green gluten-free certification on packaging. And that's the same company. They're just rebranding. You might also see certified NSF, certified gluten-free by the NSF. I tried to figure out what NSF stands for. I couldn't figure it out. So if you guys can figure it out, let me know. But that is another certifying agency. And you can also see, like, sometimes they don't even say NSF or they don't even have the logo. If you can see, this might be tiny on your screen, this Morton and Bassett spice says it's certified gluten-free by the NSF right there, if you can see it. So they're not even putting the logo on. They're just saying that it is certified gluten-free. Keep in mind that these are third-party agencies that are certifying these products as gluten-free, which means they're testing these products to make sure they're less than 20 parts per million of gluten. And the FDA doesn't regulate or accredit any of these certification programs. These are just simply third-party for-profit programs that do test products and give consumers that extra vote of confidence in their products. I also know that the GFCO, they're looking for products that are 10 parts per million or less than gluten. So it really does instill that extra layer of safety and security, knowing that a third party has validated that, you know, that product does contain less than 20 parts per million of gluten, especially as we know these guidelines are voluntary for companies to follow. All right, so then, let me go on the next. Okay. So then you're going to see another tricky statement on packaging, and those are contains statements. And I know you guys have seen tons of these contains statements, and they make you scratch your head. I'm confused by them often as well. But they come from the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act. And this is required by law for food manufacturers to disclose if their products contain any of the top 8 allergens, which are wheat, soy, milk, eggs, tree nuts, peanuts, fish, and shellfish. So if you don't see a contains statement, or you don't see that ingredient listed in plain English, like wheat or peanuts on a label, then it probably doesn't have it, although I think not all manufacturers are following these guidelines. But you can see here in the example of sodium caseinate, which I just pulled up a confusing ingredient, but that is milk, a dairy product. And so if the ingredient list says sodium caseinate parentheses milk, you know that that's their disclosure, or below the ingredient list, they might have the disclosure contains milk. Okay, so it has to be in plain English. It can't be a weird name. They have to identify if one of those top 8 allergens are in a product. Now, for you in the gluten-free world, it's lovely that they disclose that the product contains wheat. But what we realize is that gluten is found in wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and other crossbreeds of those grains. And so a contains statement, while nice, does not indicate if there is gluten in the product. So it's a clue that you can use, but it's not everything. It's not going to tell you if it has gluten or not. And then you're going to see another level of confusion on labels. And these are, I don't know if these are the official names, but I call them precautionary labels. And you'll see things like may contain wheat, or manufactured in a facility that uses wheat or soy or any of those top 8 allergens, manufactured on equipment that also processes products that contain wheat. And those are so confusing. And you're probably like, oh, can I eat? I don't know. Can I eat it or not? I don't understand what to do. And so we're going to just kind of evaluate and use some detective work to decode if certain products are safe for you to eat. So here we go. We're going to navigate some tricky situations. This is going to be fun, maybe. All right, so here is a product. Someone sent me bark thins, and I looked at the label. I didn't have any bark thins before. I had never had them. And I had 2 packages. One was the green flavor. I forgot which one that is. And then I had the one with the pink bag, which is the dark chocolate almond. And I looked at the labels on the back of each package, and I was like, this manufacturer has no idea what's in their products, because they have 2 different allergen disclosure statements. On the green package, I found manufactured on the same equipment that processes peanuts, wheat, and tree nuts. So there were no gluten ingredients, but they had that disclosure statement. And then on the pink bag, it said may contain traces of peanuts, other tree nuts, eggs, wheat, and milk. And so I'm like, well, I don't know. This product is just too confusing. So I'll give you a heads up. I did not eat it. I don't trust this product per se, but this could mean it was processed in 2 different manufacturing facilities. This could mean that they don't have their story straight. Even they're confused on how to label this. But what I can tell you is that something manufactured on the same equipment as a product that contains wheat is going to be a little bit more likely that you might have a tiny bit of gluten exposure, because they're using the same lines. And we know that bits of gluten can get stuck up in crevices and get knocked into your food, even if that line is really thoroughly cleaned. But when I see a may contain traces of wheat, I will avoid it, because they're basically telling me it might be in there, right? And maybe they're just doing that CYA, cover your arse, right? Maybe they're just doing that, but I wouldn't eat either of these products based on that disclosure statement. But let's go into some more confusion here. So I was at Home Goods last week just looking for confusing products, because I will say a lot of the products that you see here at the Nourish Festival, they're clearly labeled. These are companies that want to work with gluten-free friends like us. But when it gets into these tricky situations is when you might want to eat a piece of candy or a novelty product, or somebody wants to make you a dinner and use a certain ingredient that, or a certain packaged product that you're not familiar with. This is when it really comes, your label reading skills really come into play. Obviously, you can pick up a Canyon Bakehouse loaf of bread and feel really confident that you don't even have to look at the label. It's going to say certified gluten-free and gluten-free all over it, right? But here is a Halloween novelty product that I found at Home Goods. And it was like different shaped candy corns, pumpkin candy corn, things like that. And I know the ingredient list, it's it's not the prettiest ingredient list, but I'm here to look for gluten. I'm not here to pass judgment on anyone. And so you can look at that and see, well, I don't really see any gluten-y ingredients in there, but there is that allergen statement kind of in bold, right? So they really want you to read that. Excuse me. So you see the contains statement, and of course it contains egg, which you can also see on the ingredient label, egg whites. But then you also see that next level disclosure of manufactured in a facility that processes products containing wheat and other things. And so that is something that you have to ask yourself on your comfort level. But when it's saying it's manufactured in a facility, it could be manufactured down the hall in, 5 rooms down in a dedicated gluten-free room or something like that. For all we know, it's not saying it's manufactured on the same equipment, but it's also telling me that it hasn't really been tested or validated to be gluten-free, right? So here, this is a product that some people may not eat, and don't send me hate mail about this, but I might eat it if I really wanted to have a candy corn with my kids. I might eat this because it's only manufactured in a facility that processes wheat. It's not on the same equipment, and there's no may contains wheat. All right, so that's just a confusing ingredient, and that's something you have to decide for yourself. But that is what it means: manufactured in a facility. It could be like a mile down the hall for all you know. But they're disclosing that because they want to make sure that you know everything, right? And they're trying to, cover their bases and protect themselves and protect you. And if you are, let's say, deathly allergic to one of those ingredients, you might avoid this product altogether and look for products manufactured in dedicated gluten-free facilities, which many products are. So then you have this whole thing about labels that omit any sort of gluten-free claim or may contain claim, and you're like, well, are those safe? And to be honest, I don't know all the answers, but we're going to play a little detective work here with this Ortega taco seasoning mix that I just took this picture last week in Safeway in preparation for this talk. And I looked at the label. It says nothing about being gluten-free. It has no may contain statements or disclosures on it. And so I'm trying to find out, is this product safe for us to eat? And I see some ingredients that I'm not so sure about. So we're going to go through some of those ingredients and we're going to decode whether or not we would eat Ortega taco seasoning mix. And taco seasoning mix is a product that I get a lot of questions about. And I will say there are plenty of taco seasoning mixes out there that are gluten-free. So if you don't want to do the detective work, just put this one back on the shelf and grab one that is labeled gluten-free, or make your own, because it's really just a few ingredients like chili powder and cumin and things like that. All right, so let's become a detective here. So the first questionable ingredient that I stumble on, I guess, is maltodextrin. And a lot of people might think maltodextrin is gluten because it contains the word malt. And we've been conditioned to know malt equals barley, right? Malt comes from barley. But maltodextrin is a highly processed additive. And because it's so processed, even if it comes from wheat, which it doesn't usually come from wheat, but even if it came from wheat, the gluten would be removed from the product. And I will say the vast majority of maltodextrin used in processed foods, at least here in the US, is from corn or tapioca and not necessarily wheat. If this did contain wheat, and we found out later this contained wheat, they would have to put next to maltodextrin in parentheses wheat, or have some sort of contains statement. But I don't know. This product doesn't have many statements on it at all. So I don't really know what to believe. And in the age of transparency, when a company doesn't label something as gluten-free, it makes me wonder, like, what are they hiding? Why wouldn't they put gluten-free on this? They're such a big company. All right, so let's see what the next ingredient that I got stumbled on, or that I questioned, I guess I should say is a better way to say that. And that is modified cornstarch. And actually I was fine with the word cornstarch, but oftentimes you'll just see the word modified food starch. And you might be wondering the source of that starch. And I will say most modified corn or most modified food starch comes from corn or potato, but it can also come from wheat. And again, it should say modified wheat starch if they're going to just, disclose and follow the Consumer Protection Act disclosure laws. And then here's the final ingredient that made me maybe think I'm going to just put this back on the shelf, and that is yeast extract. And so just really quick, yeast and yeast extract, two totally different things. Yeast is what you need to bake bread, and it's gluten-free, and it's totally fine to use. But yeast extract, and you'll also see the word autolyzed yeast extract, they are made from spent brewer's yeast, which is a byproduct of the brewing process, like a beer making process. So the extra grains that are left over after they make beer, that's what spent brewer's yeast is. And that will likely contain gluten. So unless the source is written on the package of the yeast extract, or the package is labeled gluten-free, you put that thing back on the shelf because you are not going to eat yeast extract. So I'm going to show you one other example here. Many of you know this company, Knorr, and they make vegetable bouillons, all sorts of different flavors and seasoning packets. The ingredient list is not fun to look at, to be honest, but you can see right there, autolyzed yeast extract. And in parentheses, you see barley. So they don't even have to disclose that it contains barley, because barley is not one of the top 8 allergens, but they are disclosing that it contains barley. So just so you know, autolyzed yeast extract is coming from spent brewer's yeast, and it usually will contain wheat, barley, or rye. Okay, so now I want to talk about a very controversial topic, and that is oats. And if you're new to the oats industry, or if you're new to the gluten-free industry, you know oats is kind of controversial. First of all, oats are naturally gluten-free. It does not contain the protein gluten in it. However, the way that oats are processed at least in the US, and I imagine abroad, is that they are grown and harvested and processed using, they're grown on the same fields as wheat, and they're processed using the same equipment used to harvest wheat. And so what you're finding is that when you just buy a package of oats that aren't labeled gluten-free, you're actually getting quite a bit of wheat in that package as well. And I mean quite a bit, not just a trace amount, but quite a bit of wheat. I'm just going to take a quick drink. Hold on one second. Okay. So you're going to hear a lot of people in the industry, companies and bloggers and influencers, talk about purity protocol oats or commodity oats. And so you just need to know what the difference is. You're not going to see this on a label, but you're going to see people talking about it. So I put it in here because it's, again, a confusing ingredient. Do not send me hate mail. All right, so purity protocol oats are oats that are grown on dedicated gluten-free fields and on dedicated gluten-free equipment, okay? And they're harder to find. There's not as many dedicated gluten-free oats fields, and also it would be more expensive. It's definitely more expensive to make them in a way that is dedicated gluten-free. So a lot of big companies can't always use these purity protocol oats because it would really make their price of their products skyrocket. And so you see a lot of companies use what are called commodity oats, which are just normal oats that are grown in those wheat fields that we talked about, but they're optically or mechanically or both sorted, and then they're scrubbed to remove any traces of wheat. And you'll find commodity oats in Bob's Red Mill. I think they use a little bit of both kinds of oats. You'll find commodity oats in General Mills products. You'll find commodity oats in Quaker gluten-free products, Quaker oats, gluten-free oats. So here's the deal. Can you eat those commodity oats? Is it true that you need to just stick with products made with purity protocol oats? And should we be all over these companies that are using commodity oats? So I take my guidance here from the North American Society for the Study of Celiac Disease. And they say, regardless if whether purity or commodity oats are used, there must be, and these are quotes, rigorous and precise validation testing and transparent results available to the public for scrutiny. and that these companies should consistently guarantee that their oats contain less than 20 parts per million of gluten. So that means even a purity protocol oats company has to do such testing, and they have to be transparent in their results. So oats are safe for you to eat if it's labeled gluten-free and if the manufacturer has valid and strict testing measures in place that are satisfactory to you. And then that leads me to one of the most controversial products in the gluten-free community. I'm sure you can already smell the next slide, and that is Cheerios. Super controversial in the gluten-free space. And I get a lot of questions about Cheerios, and it's really hard to answer those questions because it is such a personal decision. But why are people so upset about Cheerios? Because here you see it's labeled gluten-free, and this is a big company. So what I will say is that that Cheerios is using commodity oats that are, I think mechanically sorted and scrubbed of any traces of wheat. However, the gluten-free watchdog, you can see the link at the bottom. I hope you can see that. Or just go to the glutenfreewatchdog.org. It's a great resource if you haven't been to that site before. She did some a little bit of sleuthing here and found out that maybe Cheerios isn't testing their oats in a way that is satisfactory for people with celiac disease, where companies like Bob's Red Mill and Quaker Oats are testing in a more strict and transparent manner, that maybe they weren't finding that same kind of testing with General Mills. And that's all I'm going to say, because it's a very controversial topic, and I think that every person has to make their own decision on whether they feel comfortable eating Cheerios, but that is why it's controversial. And I told you I was going to go there. I was going to go and talk about some of these controversial topics because we can't be secret about it. We need to be open and have these discussions. But that is the truth about Cheerios, is that they are using commodity oats. They are labeling gluten-free. But maybe the way that they're testing their oats isn't satisfactory to everyone. And you can go to the glutenfreewatchdog.org for more information. All right, let's talk about another controversial ingredient that I get questions on, and that is vinegar. And so all distilled vinegars are gluten-free, even if they're derived from a gluten grain. But vinegars that are not gluten-free are going to be ones where there's a flavor added, like malt, which again would be barley. But then you run into non-distilled vinegar, which usually has the word brewed or fermented on the cover of it, on the label. And that may or may not be free of gluten. It just depends on the grain that it's derived from. So rice vinegar is going to be derived from rice. Apple cider vinegar is going to be derived from apples. And so you just need to know the source. And I will say a lot of vinegars are starting to come out with gluten-free labeling, which is really helpful. And I did just double check the Heinz vinegar, and it is derived from corn. So let's talk about another really fun and controversial ingredient, and that is wheat starch. Now, I have not seen wheat starch in products here in the US, but I have seen it in products in the UK. Not the UK, in Europe. So I know some of you might be coming from Europe. You might have seen Codex wheat starch or gluten-free wheat starch in Char products. Now, Char is this awesome, huge gluten-free company, and they are actually huge, much bigger in Europe. Like when I traveled through Europe several summers ago, I found Char in so many small, big grocery stores all over. Many of the restaurants had Char rolls and things like that. So Char is just a really huge company, particularly in Europe, but also it's growing here in the US. And they use gluten-free wheat starch. And so is that legal to use, right? Is that okay? And we go back to those FDA guidelines that I told you about in the beginning that said it is safe for people on a gluten-free diet to consume wheat if the gluten has been removed and it contains less than 20 parts per million of gluten. And that is what Char is saying, that gluten-free wheat starch does not contain the protein, the seed, the gluten part of the wheat. And And they're also saying that it's been tested to contain less than 20 parts per million. So they're putting that gluten-free label on it. Again, I haven't seen these products, but I know it's in this waffle, the Char waffles. I haven't seen them here in the US. I've been looking. But again, you have to make that decision. Are you comfortable with that? Obviously, if you have a wheat allergy, totally different story. You wouldn't eat that. And an allergy is totally different than something like celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, right? So potentially, if you have celiac disease, you could still eat wheat starch and not have any reaction, right? Again, you have to make your own decision, because here we're decoding confusing ingredients, right? And I can't tell you what to do. That's such a highly personal thing for you to decide, but I can tell you that it is safe according to FDA guidelines. So let's go to another fun and controversial topic, and that is alcohol. And again, all distilled liquor, just like vinegar, technically gluten-free, even if it comes from a gluten-containing grain, because the distillation process will remove the gluten protein from the final product. And so you can enjoy most of those distilled spirits with no problem. However, again, this is a comfort level thing. So I don't know that I'm necessarily comfortable drinking vodka that has been derived from wheat, when I know I can find vodka derived from potato or corn. I actually think I have potato vodka in my bar downstairs. So you can find a lot of these spirits that are come from corn or potato or other sources. Even tequila comes from agave. So enjoy those margaritas, right? But something like whiskey is going to come from wheat, is derived from wheat. But again, it's distilled, so the gluten is removed from the final product. You have to decide what you're comfortable with. Like I said, you can drink it, but you may want to look for spirits that are derived from sources that are not gluten. Of course, if the liquor contains something like malt, a flavor, it may no longer be gluten-free. And then, let me just grab a quick drink. Hold on one second. Then if a beverage is fermented, which would be something like wine or beer, and the starting ingredient contains gluten or is gluten, then that beverage is not gluten-free. And that's why we see beer is not gluten-free. Wine is derived from grapes. So wine is almost always gluten-free unless they add something weird in there. But beer is almost always not gluten-free unless you get a gluten-free beer. So I put a picture of Holly Daly beer up there. I love that beer. I'm so lucky to live in Denver, Colorado. And this, the Holly Daly brewery is near my house, and I get to go and enjoy it. And I know Holly Daly is available in Colorado and Arizona only. There's a couple other dedicated gluten-free breweries across the country, and those are made from millet, buckwheat. Buckwheat is gluten-free, by the way, even though it has the word wheat in it, and sorghum. But what is not safe, obviously beer, and then gluten-removed beers. Gluten-removed beers are super controversial. And again, I encourage you to go do your own due diligence and not send me any sort of mail saying you're wrong or whatever, because truly, gluten-removed beers are made from wheat, barley, and rye. But they say the gluten is removed from the final product. One of the issues is that we can't test it. There's no validated testing measure to test if the gluten has been removed from the final product. And the gluten intolerance group, the GIG, they did a study and they found that people with celiac disease had reacted to gluten beers, and they've concluded that they're not safe. Right? So again, you have to make that decision, but we do have an option to enjoy gluten-free beers versus gluten-removed beers. So it's always better to choose the option that you're not in doubt of. And until we get some more clarity on gluten-removed beers, it's probably best to avoid them. Here is another really confusing ingredient, and that is wheatgrass. And wheatgrass is actually that freshly sprouted leaf of the wheat plant before the seed, the gluten piece, the seed is where the gluten is, before it even begins to form. So if you're eating the grass before the seed has even formed, then you are consuming the gluten-free part of the plant. And that's why wheatgrass is technically gluten-free, but you obviously only want to consume this ingredient if the final product has been tested gluten-free. And of course, you want to avoid it if you have a wheat allergy. But here you can see this Garden of Life wheatgrass juice powder. and you'll see wheatgrass in like a lot of cold pressed juices as well. It seems to be a common ingredient. But you can see here, certified gluten-free by the NSF. You'll see that logo. So this wheatgrass has been tested to be gluten-free and therefore safe for you to eat. Again, it's your personal decision what you're comfortable with, but it is gluten-free. Gelatin, I don't know why this is such a confusing ingredient, but I get it a lot. And I think it's because gelatin sounds a lot like gluten, maybe. I get also glutinous rice, and that is also gluten-free, but it just has that sound of gluten in it. But gelatin is actually collagen of animal bones. So if you're vegan, you don't want to eat it because it's made of like bones from cows, pigs, and fish and stuff like that. And it's a gelling agent, but it is totally gluten-free. And you can find it in like Jell-O marshmallows and gummy vitamins and things like that. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about gummies at the end of this talk because some contain wheat syrup. I'm not kidding you. So it's not the gelatin we're worried about. It's other ingredients. Sourdough. Now, if I was standing in a room with all of you, I'd say, raise your hand if someone has told you you can eat sourdough bread. And I bet you so many of you would be raising your hand right now because I still get that today. Like I still get people coming up to me like, I heard you can still eat sourdough bread. And the reason people think that is because sourdough bread is fermented, which breaks down that gluten protein to the point where it may be undetectable in the bread. But you're going to be really hard pressed to find sourdough bread that has been fermented long enough and in a way where all the gluten is basically broken down and no longer detectable in the bread. Plus, sourdough bread made from wheat flour is made in a kitchen with wheat everywhere. And I'm sorry, it's going to have wheat in it no matter what. So if you want to enjoy sourdough bread, I put up a company called Bread Seriously. They're out of San Francisco, a small bakery, and they bake gluten-free sourdough and they ship it to people's houses. It's really awesome that we have this option now. So if you're really craving sourdough, you can order that or make your own. And so many bloggers have great recipes for sourdough starters made from gluten-free grains. I have a sourdough starter that I made with sorghum, and you can just put it in and use it as like a substitute for yeast in any of your bread recipes or even in bread mixes. You can take the yeast out and use your sourdough, but make sure your sourdough comes only from gluten-free grains. Supplements, super, super confusing. So the picture here is it on the left side of your screen? I'm looking at it. It's on the left side when I'm looking at it here. This is not my picture. This was somebody who posted this picture in my gluten-free diet support group on Facebook. And you can join that. It's just called Gluten-Free Diet Support Group on Facebook. I welcome you to come join us there and ask questions and learn from our community. And she posted this because, I don't know if you can see this, it might be tiny on your screen. It says contains wheat ingredients right here, but then right below it, it says no gluten. So I don't know. Does it contain wheat starch? I don't know. I have no idea. So I encouraged her to go talk to the company and find out why it has a no gluten and it contains wheat ingredient. And I'm just showing you that to just show you like supplements is just sometimes the Wild West, and you really do need to do some digging and really make sure that the product is safe for you. And then here on the right side of the screen, this was my own personal story. This happened to me earlier this year. This company contacted me and they wanted me to try their probiotics. And so I got the bottle, and you can see there on the bottle it says no gluten. And I was super excited. Oh yeah, no gluten. Perfect. I totally would take this. But then I just went on their website because I just happened to be researching the company. It was really random. Usually I don't do that, but I just happened to be researching the company, and I looked at their ingredient list online, which wasn't the same as the bottle sitting on my desk here. And it said it had a proprietary prebiotic blend of alfalfa, barley grass, and oatgrass. And I will tell you, I'm not as nervous with the barley grass because, again, barley grass is similar to wheat grass if you're using just the grass before the seed develops. It's the gluten-free part of the barley. But I was actually quite concerned about oatgrass because I had never seen that ingredient in my 8 years of having celiac disease. I'd never seen a product with oatgrass. So I just emailed the company and I said, can you tell me more about the oatgrass and if your product has been tested gluten-free? And it was actually kind of a cool thing. They sent me their allergen testing report from the lab. So I actually got to see what an allergen test report looked like. I'd never seen one before. And on the report, I kid you not, it said gluten tested at 45.5 parts per million of gluten. Gasp. So then I went back to them. I said, you know, the legal limit is 20 parts per million. You're double the legal limit. You cannot have that no gluten label. You cannot have that on your label. And the company immediately corrected it. And I was glad that I was able to bring it to their attention without having to elevate it any further. And that's why I'm not even telling you the name of the company, because they've taken care of it, right? If they didn't take care of it, I would totally go to the FDA and report them. But they took care of it. But this is just to show you that it is a little bit hard to decode ingredients. And it is wise to sometimes go online and products you're not sure about, poke around the website, look at the FAQs. And often in the FAQs, the company will say if something's gluten-free, because they get the gluten-free questions so much that it is part of their FAQs, frequently asked questions. So I almost always find information in the FAQs, or I'll email the company. All right, and so finally, I want to leave you with some of my favorite, not so favorite, I should say, tricky products. So the next slide is going to feature all these products that most of us don't think contain gluten, but they do, and they're so tricky, especially if you're new to the gluten-free world. All right, so here's my list of surprise. These contain gluten, and you'll see I have Haribo Gold Bears gummy bears. So sad. I really did love gummy bears in my past life. It contains wheat syrup. Now, I think some Haribo varieties do not contain wheat syrup. They all contain gelatin. They actually contain pork gelatin, in case you're curious on the source of the gelatin, but they are not gluten-free. So sorry. The other one is so sad, is red vines. I'll never forget, my friend had us over for a gluten-free meal. And at the end of the meal, she said, I didn't make the dessert gluten-free. I didn't know how. I'm like, oh my gosh, don't worry, no problem. So she made dessert for everyone else, but she brought me a bucket of red vines. And she said, but I bought you these. So this was my dessert for the night. So I was new. I didn't know red vines. And so I just, of course, flip it over, look at the label and the ingredient list. And I was gasping when I realized the first ingredient in red vines and licorice is wheat flour. So say goodbye to licorice. It is not your friend. Obviously, a lot of you know soy sauce is not gluten-free. And the problem with soy sauce is it's just hidden in so many products. But the great substitute is tamari, coconut aminos, or a gluten-free labeled soy sauce. Another really confusing product right here is seitan. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And it's an imitation meat. So it has like a chewy texture from what I understand. Trust me, I haven't eaten it. But it has like this chewy texture that mimics meat. And it looks like all healthy, like it would be this healthy product, but it is made from wheat flour, actually. It's made from, I believe, I want to say almost 100% vital wheat gluten, if I'm not mistaken, if that's the ingredient. And so that product will probably put you over the edge if you react to gluten. Do not eat any seitan, S-E-I-T-A-N. Do not eat it. The same here with this crab smart. I like to make my own sushi rolls. And I was in Whole Foods looking for imitation crab to use. And this is the brand I found in Whole Foods. I think it's called Kinimi. I'm not sure. And it contains wheat flour. Again, probably because it gives you that chewy texture that would mimic what crab tastes like. Now, I have found imitation crab without gluten, plenty of other options, but for some reason, the brand that I found in Whole Foods contained gluten. All right, down here, Wishbone Creamy Caesar. this product contains soy sauce and therefore wheat as well. So you really have to look at dressings because some are free of gluten and some contain gluten, and you really have to scrutinize those labels and really look for ones that are labeled gluten-free. Let's support the companies that are disclosing this kind of information to us. Again, here's another meatless meatballs by Guardian. And I thought, oh, well, of course these would be gluten-free. They look so healthy, right? And again, it's that imitation meat, and imitation meat more likely than not contains gluten because it's got that vital wheat protein, gives it that chewy texture of meat. If you do want to eat meatless meat, Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger are both gluten-free. They've both been formulated to be gluten-free. Impossible Burger used to contain gluten. I promise you right now it does not. And so you can enjoy those meatless options. Just don't go to Gardein and some of these other companies that you might see in the grocery store. Home-style gravy from Heinz. This gravy is thickened with wheat flour. This is the gravy my parents used to serve at Thanksgiving. I think they still have it when I'm not there. But just so you know that is thickened with wheat, and many gravies and sauces are thickened with wheat. And it's just something for you to be aware of. And then Play-Doh. I know you don't eat Play-Doh. I'm not that. I know we don't eat Play-Doh, but we touch it and it gets in our fingernails and then we're touching surfaces all over the house. And it is made from wheat and the gluten will get everywhere. So I just recommend not having Play-Doh in your house if anyone in your house is sensitive to gluten or has celiac disease. And finally, this one makes me so mad. Kellogg's Rice Krispies. We all know rice is 100% gluten-free. But there we go. Kellogg's decided to put barley malt on their Rice Krispies, and they are no longer gluten-free. You can find other options of crispy rice, though. All right, finally, please come visit my booth. You can find the link to pre-order my awesome new book called Dear Gluten. It's not me, it's you. I'm so proud of this work because it's not just about how to be gluten-free, but it's really about how to restore your health from celiac disease and gluten sensitivity. And it comes out in October. Like I said, I don't even have a hard copy here to show you. It's so new. So I hope you will support me and will enjoy this book. And then I also have a free gift for you. So I'm giving you my 10 favorite weeknight meals recipe book. So go visit that link, bit.ly, the bit.ly/good-for-you-recipes, okay? And you can sign up and I'll email you my 10 favorite weeknight meals recipe book. Super delicious gluten-free meals that are really good for you too. Good, clean ingredients. And then let's keep in touch. That's where you can find me online, Good For You Gluten Free, on Instagram, Facebook. And please feel free to email me if you have any questions or any trouble getting your free gift, okay? All right, so I am gonna switch here to come back on screen. I just have to figure out how to do that. How do I do that? Here we go. Okay, I think I'm back on. Woohoo! I am happy to answer some of your questions live here. I think I have 10 minutes to do so. Sorry, I get a little bit excited and talk. And I see there's so many awesome comments. I'm going to scroll here to the top. And oh, so exciting. Jen said we had 925 people on here. That's really exciting. I love it. I love that you guys are all here. I see a question, could vinegar in mustard be a problem? So again, you have to find out, is it distilled mustard? If it's distilled, no. And you also need to look at the label and decode it a little bit more because it's hard for me to know for sure without seeing it. My picture, I hope you guys got to see that presentation. Oh, this keeps scrolling up on me. Maybe I'll start at the bottom here. Let me see if there's any other questions here, or if you want to put your question in again. It keeps shifting me down here. Yeah, people are horrified to find gluten in so many products. I hope that was really helpful. Ooh, I love, there's a sourdough class this Saturday. Yes, learn how to make your own gluten-free sourdough. Do not trust people when they say you can eat gluten-free or you can eat sourdough bread. It has to be labeled gluten-free. Someone just said, how about barbecue sauce? Again, you're going to have to look, because barbecue sauce can have all sorts of gluten ingredients. Always look for a barbecue sauce that is labeled gluten-free, and really scrutinize that contains statement and allergy statement. Really, you have to look. I will say it's a crapshoot with barbecue sauces, but there are some excellent brands out there that are labeled gluten-free, certified gluten-free, and so you can trust those, okay? Do other countries have different laws and protocols regarding parts per million of gluten? That is an excellent question, and you will have to check. Every country has its own laws. Obviously, the FDA is just here in the US. I do believe they are similar across the world. I think they might even be more stringent in specific countries. So you will have to, when you're traveling, find out what the country's labeling laws are. But like I said, you're going to find, like if you travel through the US, you're going to find like Udis everywhere, right? And when you travel through Europe, you're going to find Char everywhere. And so you're going to find some of these products that you know and trust are gluten-free. Oh, please tell us about your book. Oh, so glad you asked. I've been working on this book for I want to say 3 years now. It's called Dear Gluten. It's not me, it's you. And I talk about how to get gluten, how to break up with gluten. It's a Dear John letter to gluten. And I talk about how to break up with gluten, both, physically getting it out of your life, also that emotional aspect. I don't know about you, but I've cried in many bathrooms when there's been no food for me to eat at an event, and I'm really upset. And so I talk about how to deal with some of the emotional aspects. And then the whole second part of my book is all about how to become healthy. Because when I first went gluten-free, after I was diagnosed with celiac disease, I was broken. I still didn't feel well. My gut was in shambles. And it was when you're, well, you don't know this, but if you were stabbed in your gut with a knife, and you just remove the knife, there's still so many wounds left behind that you need to nurture those wounds. And so I think of the knife as gluten, and it just I took the gluten out, but I still didn't feel well. And it was because there was so much damage to my gut. And so I really help you understand what's going on with your body and how to restore your gut health and your whole body health. And I have a beautiful foreword in the book written by Dr. Tom O'Brien, who wrote The Autoimmune Fix. Some of you might know his work. He's an amazing doctor in the gluten sensitivity world, and he collaborated with me on this book. And Dr. David Perlmutter from Grain Brain gave me this beautiful endorsement of the book. He read the book. And so I do include a lot of that health information, along with how to break up with gluten and how to get over it. Dr. Tom is amazing. I can see that. Oh yes, Robin, yes, crying at events. It still happens to me, even 8 years into this. It's just so emotional. I don't know why. It's just a trigger for me. And so I talk a lot about that in the book too, because it is a breakup. Getting a diagnosis of celiac disease or gluten sensitivity and not being able to eat something and be a part of social events in the same way, it's very emotional. It's very trying. I could cry right now. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, I think that it is like a breakup. It's a breakup with an ex-boyfriend that maybe you're not over, but you have to get over. So we talk a lot about that in the book. Here I see a question, French fries. I'm told that frozen ones in restaurants arrive dusted with flour. Oh, you do. When you buy frozen French fries, just turn over and look at the label. A lot of them are coated with some sort of starch, the same with shredded cheese. You just want to know if it's cornstarch, tapioca starch, or if it's wheat. It can totally be wheat. I see cornstarch the most here, at least in the US. Okay, someone said, if the product says it's manufactured in a facility that processes wheat, but also says the product is certified GF, can you trust it? That is an excellent question. I actually tried to find a product because I've seen that. I couldn't remember where I've seen it. I've seen a product that says it is manufactured in a facility that contains wheat, but it's certified gluten-free. And again, I told you, in a facility could mean it's down the hall on totally different equipment. So yes, I would 100% trust that product if they took the time to get certified gluten-free, even if they have that disclosure statement. That disclosure statement is for someone who might be deathly allergic to wheat and won't go near any food in a facility where wheat is. And think about when you eat in a restaurant, you're eating in a facility that also makes food that has gluten in it. Or when I eat at my mom's house, my mom is not gluten-free. So my mom and dad might make me something and taking precautions. They're cleaning everything to make it safe for me, but their house isn't a dedicated gluten-free facility, right? So that's just kind of how I would equate that. Talk to us about McDonald's fries and hash browns. I don't know a lot about it. I believe McDonald's fries are coated with wheat, and they are cooked in a fryer that might be cross-contaminated. I'm not sure. I think they actually have a dedicated gluten fryer, but I do believe they are coated with wheat. McDonald's isn't necessarily a place I personally trust for gluten-free. I do know that you can check with your McDonald's. You can also get gluten-free fries at Chick-fil-A, and just check and make sure your Chick-fil-A follows these protocols, but I believe it's cooked in a dedicated peanut oil fryer. Five Guys as well, peanut oil. Those are gluten-free fries, and Red Robin by request will also have gluten-free fries. Just check with your local restaurant. I will tell you, fries are my weakness. I love French fries, so I do know a lot about fries, but I've always stayed away from McDonald's, and I believe it's because they coat them in wheat. Do you trust sliced cheeses? So I usually buy packaged cheese where I can read the label, the sliced packaged cheeses. I usually don't get my sliced cheeses or meats from the deli because I think there's too much risk for cross-contamination in a deli. Behind the counter at Safeway when they're slicing the meats. I actually will usually buy a packaged one that is labeled. My new book is not on my website. Go to my exhibit booth. I literally got the book up on Amazon today. It's at the printer. It's just not quite ready, but we got it up on Amazon today. So the link is in my exhibit booth here. And you can also email me at jenny@goodforyouglutenfree.com, and I'll send you the link as well. And I have a special. If you buy my book and send me the receipt that you pre-ordered it, I'm going to send you 4 weeks of meal plans. I also have this awesome meal planning service. And so if you send me the receipt that you pre-ordered the book here at the Nourish Fest, so I'm going to send you 4 weeks of meal plans, which are amazing if you're struggling to eat. Deli meat might be GF, might not be. So the bigger risk for me is that it could be gluten-free, but it's cross-contaminated potentially in the deli. They're not cleaning the slice, when they slice your bread, they're not cleaning the slicer between meats. And so I don't know, it could have been a ham that had soy sauce on it sliced right before my turkey that is supposed to be gluten-free. So that's why I always just buy, if I am going to buy deli meat, I buy it packaged. We should always ask if a restaurant has a dedicated fryer. Yes, Marty, great question, great reminder. Laura said, I have 2 kids. I'm the only one in the house with celiac. I get cross-contaminated a lot because I can prepare their food. I feel your pain, Laura. Do you have any recommendations? Oh, shoot, it went away. Where'd it go? Do you have any recommendations for low-cost GF products so it doesn't break my budget? And is there a go-to way to prevent cross-contamination while cooking? Yes, it can be challenging. I feel your pain. It is more expensive to be gluten-free, but I really do recommend cooking with whole ingredients. And, some of the most inexpensive ingredients are gluten-free, like rice and beans and even nut butters and things like that. They are inexpensive and totally gluten-free. This is exactly, Laura, why I started my meal planning program, is that people want to know how to cook with whole real ingredients without having to buy a lot of packaged foods. And so all my recipes usually include about 10 clean ingredients, like tomatoes and red peppers and ground turkey or beef or something like that. And, so you really can do it on a budget and really make satisfying meals for your family. So email me, happy to chat more. It's totally a topic I love to talk about. Oh, Melissa, you brought up the NEMA sensor. Oh my gosh, the NEMA sensor. If you don't know what the NEMA sensor is, it's a product that you can use to test your food for gluten. And I, for many years, used the NEMA sensor. Some of you might have seen me doing videos on Facebook Live where I'd go to a restaurant and we'd find out together if my burger contained gluten using the NEMA sensor. So the NEMA sensor was sold. The founders sold the NEMA sensor in March right before the pandemic hit. And this company bought it, Medline. It's a huge medical device manufacturing company. And since they bought it, they have not been manufacturing the test capsules. You can't find them anywhere. It's devastating to me and to our community. It's really upsetting. Many of us have been in contact with people at Medline. We're getting different answers. I've personally discussed this issue with the press representative at Medline. It is very upsetting. Anyway, right now I can't recommend the NEMA sensor to anyone because I don't know that you can find the test capsules. But if you have test capsules, of course, you can test your food for gluten. There's so many questions here. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to read them all and it keeps kicking me down. I have a problem with coconut milk out of a can and can't understand why. You know, read that can, look at that company's website and really look at it. And now it may not always be gluten. Not everything is about gluten, right? There's other things that could be bothering you. So, you know, maybe it's coconut or something, right? So you don't know. It could contain gluten. You want to look into that further. You might have other food sensitivities. You know, I'm happy to chat with you about that as well. Go ahead and email me. Jenny at Good For You Gluten Free. If anyone wants to reach me or has trouble getting your free gift, just email me and I'll send you the link. I've been having some trouble with some of that. There's so many questions and it keeps kicking me down. I've heard conflicting info about whether or not the ingredient natural flavoring is gluten-free or not. Is it safe in the US? I think the concern is, what is the natural ingredient derived from? I know. Well, wheat is natural, right? So again, natural flavoring, I didn't even put that in my talk because there's so many confusing ingredients, but you're right, that is another confusing ingredient and you need to know what natural flavoring is, right? And so you just have to ask the right questions and look at the sources. Are Kraft marshmallows gluten-free? Yes, actually Kraft marshmallows are gluten-free, and obviously you want to read the label just to make sure nothing has changed since my last information. Kraft will always have the latest information on their labels. So check labels. Kraft's actually really good about labeling for wheat and gluten. Marshmallows do contain gelatin. Again, gelatin's gluten-free. I believe it's a pork gelatin. So it's an animal byproduct, not gluten. Let's see, I see more. Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. Seitan, not Seton? I have no idea. The wheat meat among vegetarians, right. A lot of vegetarians eat seitan. Am I saying that right? It is totally wheat, vital wheat gluten. Yeah, stay away from that. Stay away from that. I am looking at some of these other questions. Thank you, Robin. I agree with the gluten-removed beers, and it made her sick. Let's see here. Spices. Okay, Justine asked about spices, so I'm going to talk a little bit about spices. I have an article at goodforyouglutenfree.com. Just search for spices. I wrote all about spices and which brands are safe, which ones are not, which ones I don't know, right? There are several certified gluten-free spice brands, including Spicely and Morton and Bassett, if I'm saying that right. And so, and there's a couple other ones, like some of McCormick's spices are gluten-free. Again, the best information is going to be on the label. Spices are very confusing. I've personally tested with my NEMA sensor several spices at Trader Joe's, and some came back okay and some did not. So spices are a tough one. It's going to be a trace amount of gluten because you don't put a ton of spice in something, but you still want to not be eating gluten. So when you are cooking at home, I would recommend using gluten-free spices as much as possible. And that is an expense, unfortunately. I like to spice my food with onions and garlic that I get at home, or cilantro, coriander in the UK. And so fresh spices are always your best bet. If you can't, fresh basil, it's gonna taste better. And so you'll notice a lot of my recipes, especially in my meal plans, use as many fresh spices as possible. Please repeat the name of the sourdough bread brand. It's called Bread Seriously, SRSLY. And if you email me, I'm happy to send that to you. And I might have a coupon for, I didn't even remember that. If you go to my website, goodforyouglutenfree.com/shop, click on the shop tab, it'll link you to Bread Seriously, and I think I have a coupon code on there too, so you can get a deal. I didn't even think to put that in my presentation here. Thrive Market spices are gluten-free. Okay, that's good to know, Ricky. I didn't know that. I might have to update my article now. And let me just see. Someone asked about Quaker brand oats. Yes, Quaker oats, some, if you look, are gluten-free. Obviously not all Quaker oats, but some Quaker oats are gluten-free. And I believe people are satisfied with their testing. It is a commodity oat, not a purity protocol oat. But I think the celiac community, the consensus is that we are satisfied with Quaker oats testing. So those would be okay as long as you are satisfied too, and you can do your own research on that as well. Let's see here. Someone wrote, NSF International was founded. Oh, like, yes. I don't know what NSF stands for, though. I know it's an organization. So is cellulose GF? Ooh, I don't know, honey. You have to Google that one. Stephanie said, does blue cheese contain gluten since it's from a mold? Yes, I have heard that too. And I believe that is true, that blue cheese is grown on mold spores, wheat mold spores, right? So it could be contaminated with gluten. I don't personally eat blue cheese, so it's never been a problem, but I would do some more research on that and check with the brands, because some brands might be fine. Please, here, what if I type my email address? Okay, Jenny@goodforyouglutenfree.com. And then if you go to goodforyouglutenfree.com / I think shop, that's where you can find that Bread Seriously link. Okay, and then I can send, I got to look it up. The Bit.ly, would you guys like that link too? Hold on one second. I'm gonna, where you can get my free recipes. Actually, just go here. This is gonna be an easier link for me to get up. So get your 10 free weeknight recipes. These are super delicious recipes, some of my favorites. Just go to that link right there and you can sign up and it'll come right into your inbox. Okay, Natalie, I knew someone was going to ask me about mushrooms and whether they are safe. Okay, mushrooms are gluten-free. I have heard that too, that they are grown on also wheat or barley spores. I don't know. I really don't know enough about mushrooms. I just also know, I don't know enough about internet rumors either. So mushrooms are actually, I have had no problem with them. But that doesn't mean they're safe for everyone, right? So do your homework. I will tell you, mushrooms are one of the most amazing superfoods. There's a lot of research with mushrooms and cancer prevention. So hopefully we can still eat mushrooms. But because we're having a discussion here on whether they contain gluten, I would definitely do a little more research. I did not prepare for that question. I knew I was going to get it, though. I didn't have time. I have heard that. I still eat mushrooms, to be honest. And I don't think it's a true rumor, but I'm not sure. I can't say for sure, okay? NSF, National Sanitation Foundation, okay, or National Science Foundation. Oh, we have a couple of guesses here. Yeah, I have no idea what NSF stands for sure. All right, Monica said, is it true that makeup, soaps, shampoos need to be GF for celiac? Great question. Beauty products, I talk a ton about this in my book as well. And yes, here's the thing. Gluten cannot be absorbed by your skin, at least as far as we know. Science is changing, right? Like a birth control or a nicotine patch can be absorbed by your skin, but they're saying that gluten cannot be absorbed by your skin and cause an autoimmune reaction in people with celiac disease. You must actually ingest it into your small intestine. So, well, it probably doesn't have to be gluten-free. I think if you are being on the safe side and recognizing that some things can get into your mouth, that you should look for products that are gluten-free. If you have a wheat allergy, yes, no wheat in your shampoos. That will give you a bad reaction. I would say anything that comes near your face, that you touch a ton with your hands, lip balms, 100% should be gluten-free. 100%. Like I I have an article on my website about lip balms that are gluten-free. I had a hard time getting answers from some of the companies, but like something like Lip Smackers contains wheat germ. So you really do want to look. A lot of vitamin E comes from wheat. So you just need to look at those products. And there are plenty of gluten-free lip balm options, and I list them on my website. Okay, so we're finding out that the NSF stands for National Sanitation Foundation. What about strawberries? Strawberries are gluten-free, totally gluten-free. Again, we love those products without a label. So I'm trying to go through. I love all of you looking up NSF. It's so cute. All right, I think I might have answered, I'm hoping I've answered all the questions of some. Oh, I did find some more. Caramel color, you have to look that one up. It depends. A lot of caramel color comes from barley. Natural special flavorings, you have to look it up. Could definitely come from malt. You have to look it up. You have to decode the label. Nutritional yeast, as far as I know, is gluten-free. Again, you need to read the label. Maybe not all brands are, but you can definitely find gluten-free nutritional yeast, no problem. Again, yeast is gluten-free. It's that yeast extract that isn't. So Scott says, my partner is celiac, and after I drink a beer and kiss her, she would break out. Right. If my date, well, I'm married, but if my date ate gluten, he would not get a good night kiss. So yes, you know, and my husband, several years into my celiac diagnosis, decided he would go gluten-free in solidarity with me. I talk a little bit about why in the book as well, but he wanted to be with me. He wanted to know like that. He wanted to know what I was going through on a day-to-day basis. And he also wanted to be able to like kiss me and not be like, nope, don't come near me. And he's been feeling so much better too, right? So it's kind of one of those things where our family is gluten-free at home and he's gluten-free full-time, and it's made me feel safer being in my own home. Melissa, I've been gluten-free for 10 years and I just learned about yeast extract being gluten-y. Thank you for that. Yes, yeast extract. Just make sure you look at that ingredient. It just stumps me all the time. And you don't even know the source. So yes, always look up yeast extract and understand if it's gluten-free or not. Frozen veggies and fruits. So that's an interesting thing. Most frozen veggies and fruits are going to be fine, but somebody posted in my gluten-free diet support group last year a package of frozen veggies from Walmart. I think it was the Walmart brand, and it contained wheat. So you have to read labels. Anything in a bag, box, jar, you have to read those labels. They shock you. Just like when I first was handed that box, that container of red vines, it's like, oh yeah, that's totally gluten-free. And then when I turned it over, it's like, oh, it contains wheat flour. So you have to look at labels on everything that comes in a package. Now, obviously, you hold an avocado, you don't have to look at the label. Can my husband brush his teeth after drinking a beer? I think so. I think he can brush his teeth, rinse his mouth out, and you should be fine. It is definitely something to be conscious of if you're having a reaction. If you didn't eat any gluten, and then you kiss your husband who had a beer and you feel sick, then maybe that could be the cause. I mean, that is a cause of cross-contamination. It's on his lips, but hopefully he is cleaning before he kisses you. Oh my gosh, Monica, you've been had celiac disease for 20 years. Amazing. Thank you for paving the way for us. I really appreciate it. Yes, I have a support group. Let me grab that link. On Facebook. Just give me 1 second to pull the link up. I pop in here every so often. You guys can come join. Please join. I would love to have you there.